Hi, I'm Celine.
Last week, I walked into the bank to withdraw $100. Nothing major, nothing dramatic. It wasn't even for me. It was for my neighbor, Mrs. Hutchkins. She needed some grocery money to get her through the week. I figured, what's $100 if it helps someone eat? I didn't expect anything special. I just stood in line like everybody else until I heard her. My sister Vera, branch manager, power blazer, always 5 steps ahead in her own mind. She didn't whisper. She didn't lean in gently. She announced it. "We don't serve beggars here." Loud enough that every single head in that lobby turned my way. The marble floors, the glass walls, the meticulously curated air of wealth and success, they all seemed to freeze for a second. A man lowered his phone. A woman looked over her glasses. Even the security guard shifted, unsure whether to intervene or just watch it unfold. The word sliced clean. Beggars. I didn't flinch. Not outwardly, but inside, something cracked. Not freshly, not dramatically, more like an old hairline fracture finally giving way. Because what none of them knew, what Vera didn't know, was that I could have emptied that bank's reserves with one keystroke. I had the access, the leverage, the legal authority. But that day wasn't about money. It was about silence. Silence, my loyalty, my name. Have you ever been betrayed so smoothly, so publicly, that you start to wonder if you misunderstood the rules? If maybe, just maybe, you really were the problem all along. Until something inside hums awake, like an engine you forgot was still running. Stick around, because by the end of this story, Vera would be the one on her knees. But first, tell me, where are you listening from? What time is it? Drop it in the comments. I read them all. The cold came early this year. Cincinnati's sidewalks glittered faintly with a sheen of last night's frost. Trees along 4th Street clung to the last of their leaves like they weren't ready to let go, like me. I wore thrift store jeans, a hand-stitched winter coat I'd repaired twice this year, and a red scarf I bought from a street vendor ages ago. $20 that felt like rebellion when I had no backup plan. Inside Crescent Bank, it smelled like eucalyptus and expensive polish, the kind of scent that screams power and money and exclusion. It was all marble and chrome, hushed voices and heels that clicked like judgment. I kept my head up. There wasn't much in my account, but Mrs. Hutchkins needed that 100, and I knew what it felt like to smile through hunger. The line moved slowly. I kept my eyes on the teller window. Then I heard her voice. Well, isn't this a surprise? Smooth, cold, dipped in sugar and sharpened with steel. Vera. Of course she wore winter white. Of course her makeup was flawless. Of course she walked like she owned the air. "Celine," she said louder now, "still using this branch?" I didn't say anything, not at first. She leaned in close, fake smile never breaking. "You know we've updated our client tiers, right?" she whispered. "We don't really serve walk-ins anymore." And then louder, clear as a bell. "Especially not beggars." The word echoed. People paused. Eyes flicked toward me, then away, then back again. The same way you glance at a car crash. Vera just smiled wider. "You understand, don't you?" I nodded. Not because I agreed. Because I knew. Sometimes silence is sharper than a scream. I touched my scarf, just for a second, then stepped out of line. My boots made no sound on the polished floor. I didn't look back. Outside, the cold felt cleaner. My reflection in the glass door showed a face that didn't flinch. Chin lifted, eyes steady. No tears. Not anymore. That night, in my apartment, the radiator clicked and hummed like it was singing a lullaby just for me. The air smelled like peppermint tea and old books. Comfort. I folded the scarf, laid it on the table gently, then pulled the laptop from beneath the couch. It blinked twice. Then came to life. Encrypted. Secure. Expected. One message. I read it twice, then shut the lid. My heart didn't pound. It pulsed. Steady, quiet, sure. I picked up the scarf again. Ran it through my hands. The last time I wore it like armor, Vera had called me a parasite. At a Christmas party I wasn't even invited to. I remembered fastening the buttons of my coat in the snow afterward, whispering to myself through numb lips. One day, they'll see. Tonight I didn't whisper. I dialed a number no one in my family even knew existed. "Hey," I said calmly, "it's Celine. I need a favor." She didn't call. She never does. But I imagined her face anyway. The way she'd crumple if she knew I still had access to the system, that I still held the key to her entire operation. Because years ago when my family pushed me out, it wasn't failure. It was strategy. I didn't drift. I disappeared, with purpose. In the silence, I built something. With RA, I helped launch Shellcode 7. He raised the capital. I built the trust architecture. Legal walls in 5 countries. Firewalls, shells, blind signatures. By year 2, I was the majority stakeholder. Hidden, untouchable. And now, Crescent Bank hosted a slice of our liquidity portfolio. Vera had signed the onboarding forms herself. Never checked whose name sat at the top. It was mine. When our father passed, he left everything to Vera. The will said to exclude Celine for her own good, as if poverty were a gift. So I gave them space, and I watched, until the moment came, until the cursor blinked. Show active accounts. Shellcode 7. The screen lit up. 3.5 billion. Not stolen. Not gifted. Earned. Built. Mine. I paused, let the weight of it settle in my chest, then pressed enter. And something in me, something old and small and waiting, let go. Nothing exploded. There were no alarms, no flickering lights, no dramatic countdowns. But in that moment, sitting cross-legged on my thrifted couch, warm tea untouched beside me, I felt it. Something shift, quietly, deep down. A knot that had lived in my chest for years, simply unspooled. I shut the laptop, held it for a second longer than I needed to, then stood and crossed the room, pausing by the door. My red scarf hung there, still, not armor, not camouflage. A symbol, of survival, of memory, of intent. I reached for it, fingers brushing the fabric. Tomorrow I'd walk into Crescent Bank again. But not as a sister. Not as a client. Not as a beggar. Wow. Morning light glared off the glass tower downtown, turning the bank's facade into a mirror. I stepped out of my car and looked up at it. Tall, cold, impressive. Once intimidating. Not today. A doorman in a gray suit opened the door for me. "Ma'am," he said with a respectful nod. I returned it. Inside, the bank was unchanged. Same polished floors, same chilled air, same too bright lighting. But everything felt smaller now. At the front desk, a young receptionist with clipped bangs and nervous energy smiled at me. "Good morning. Welcome to—" "I have an appointment," I said, sliding a sleek folio across the counter. "It's under Shellcode Holdings." She tapped the screen, then paused. Her eyes blinked in confusion. A red notification appeared, then another. She glanced up, unsure. I need to get the branch manager." From across the room, Vera looked up. Her smile, rehearsed, camera ready, froze when she saw me. She took one step toward the front, then another, heels like gunshots on tile. "What are you doing here?" she snapped under her breath, the smile gone now. "I told you yesterday, this isn't a shelter. Whatever game you're playing, don't." I didn't reply. The receptionist held up the folio. Vera snatched it, flipped it open. The expression on her face changed so fast it was almost beautiful, confidence melting into confusion, confusion into fear. She flipped another page, then another, then stopped. Behind her, the regional manager arrived. Older, silver-haired, calm, authority without noise. He took the folio from Vera without a word, walked to the nearest terminal and typed something in. He paused, then looked up at Vera. "This is a top-tier authorization," he said evenly. "Primary account holder flagged as high-security VIP. Transaction request, $3.5 billion. Gasps, real ones this time. The receptionist's hand hovered over the lock button. Vera tried to speak. "That's fake. She's not. This is fake." "It's real," I said quietly. "And for the last 3 years, you've been working for me." She staggered back. No, that's not possible." The manager glanced at her. "You signed the onboarding yourself." The receptionist locked the doors. "Audit protocol. No one in, no one out." Someone dropped a pen. It echoed like thunder. Vera's knees buckled. She fell. Literally fell. Right there on the marble. "Celine," she whispered, eyes wide with something I hadn't seen since we were kids. Fear. "Please, I have a child. I have a job. I didn't mean—" I tilted my head. "You ruined yourself. All I did was let you." Silence. The kind that hums under your skin. "You're my sister," she said, a desperate whimper. "Am I?" I replied. "You made it pretty clear I wasn't part of this family a long time ago." Behind her, bank employees stood frozen. No one moved. The regional manager cleared his throat. "Would you like to continue this conversation in private?" "Yes," I said. He called the elevator. As I passed Vera, I didn't look down. The folio was tucked under my arm. My heels echoed louder than hers ever had.
Deceased.
The investor lounge was all sleek leather, muted lighting, and walls meant to impress. But I didn't sit, not right away. My phone buzzed. Clarice. Of course. Straight to voicemail. A minute later, George, I answered. He only ever called when something valuable was at stake. Celine, he said, stretching my name like taffy. Evening. You're a hard woman to reach these days. I let silence answer. He chuckled, awkward. Clarice is a little surprised by everything. You know how she gets. More silence. He tried again. Look, I'm just checking in. We noticed some, major movements. Impressive, really. I didn't know you were so involved. Is that so? You've been investing in projects, he said, fishing. Private ones. Clarice mentioned it. I sipped my wine. Funny, I said. I seem to remember her telling me to marry rich instead. He laughed. Well, you've certainly proven everyone wrong. We were actually thinking maybe we could all grab brunch, talk things through. Brunch. Like all of this could be folded into a mimosa. No, I said simply. He paused. Clarice thinks maybe we didn't treat you fairly. There it is, I replied. Not an apology, just a maybe. The line went quiet. Then, still, it'd mean a lot if you'd come. I'm afraid I'm booked, I said, plenty of pretending to be important. I didn't mean, I know what you meant. Then I ended the call. No shaking hands, no breathless panic. Just quiet.
Oh.
I opened my laptop. The dashboard glowed, subtle and familiar. My name at the top. Majority shareholder. A new message blinked. Carmen. Vera just tried to access the executive panel. Me. Of course she did. Carmen. I blocked her. Me. Let them wonder. I smiled, then reached for a leather folder on my shelf. Inside was an old photo, me and Grandpa. I was maybe 8. He was crouched beside me, holding up a rusted wrench like it was treasure. He used to say, "Let her build. She'll surprise you." I brushed my thumb over the picture. Buzz. Another message. Carmen. They invited you to a family dinner. Want me to accept for you? I didn't answer. Not yet. I just stared at the photo. Let the silence breathe. A test. Or a trap. Maybe both. But I didn't flinch. Friday came with a strange weight to it. Not dread, exactly. Just anticipation. Like the air before a thunderstorm. I dressed with precision. A navy blouse, tailored slacks, no jewelry beyond a slim watch. My hair was pulled back, not for beauty, but for clarity. I didn't want distraction. I wanted presence. By 6:45 p.m., I stepped into Villaro's, our family's go-to restaurant for celebrations past. Birthdays, graduations, anniversaries. I had eaten countless dinners there as a girl, usually at the kids' table, quietly waiting to be noticed. The scent hadn't changed: rosemary, garlic, polished wood, and linen napkins. But I had. A hostess escorted me to a long table tucked into a private corner. A sign rested at the center. Reserved. For once, the word didn't sting. I sat at the head of the table. Alone. For now. The seconds ticked by. At 6:57, I heard them. The click of designer heels. Laughter that didn't quite reach the eyes. Clarice appeared first. Chanel earrings, crimson lips, and a smile just wide enough to hide uncertainty. Well, someone's glowing, she said, settling into the seat directly across from me, like we were rivals on a talk show. You've been busy, haven't you? I didn't reply, just ran my fingertip around the rim of my glass. George came next, always too eager, too polished. Celine, he said like we were old friends. You look grounded. That's a good thing. Then Vera. No makeup this time, no jewelry, no false smile. She nodded at me, eyes low, and took the farthest seat she could find. Last came my mother, Helen. Older, slower now, but still regal, still sharp. My girls, she said softly, settling at the table's end. Look at us. I looked at my napkin instead. The waitress came and took orders. Clarice ordered a bottle of wine. George echoed her. Vera asked for water. Mom requested chamomile tea. Then the performance began. Clarice, with syrupy grace, "You seem so calm lately. Are you doing yoga?" George added, "Or maybe just making smart investments." I said nothing. Helen, voice low, "Things have been complicated since your father passed." Complicated. That was the word they all leaned on, like it explained everything, like it forgave it. No one said, "We failed you," or "We were wrong." Just vague, collective grief. Then Clarice asked it, the question they'd all been circling. "Are you okay?" I smiled politely, then leaned forward. Did any of you ever wonder what happened to Grandfather's Pennsylvania Land Trust? The air changed. George blinked. Clarice's spine straightened. Helen froze mid-sip. Vera paled. That trust was dissolved, she said slowly. Years ago, wasn't it? I pulled out the slim folder. Embossed. Stamped. Active. Actually, I said, it wasn't. I opened it. Laid it on the table. Page by page. First, the original will. Equal distribution among his grandchildren. Then, a forged amendment. Dated 2 weeks before our father's stroke. I pointed to the notary seal. Fake. Next, property deeds. The vineyard in Oregon, transferred quietly into Clarice's offshore account. Then came the endowment, the fund for girls in STEM, funneled into real estate projects under Clarice's shell company. A whisper rippled through the room. This was signed under our mother's name, I said. Clarice's voice wavered. She gave me permission. You don't know everything, Celine. I held up the final page. The date on this is the same day she was in surgery in Zurich. More silence. One of our uncles shifted uncomfortably. A cousin lowered his gaze. Then someone handed me a laptop. I plugged in the drive. A screen flickered to life behind me. Emails, bank statements, spreadsheet trails. No need for commentary. Just the truth. Clarice's voice cracked. You always had to be the victim, didn't you? I turned. No, I said evenly. I just wanted to be seen. You wanted to disappear me. Clarice's hand trembled as she reached for her drink. But the next voice didn't come from me. It came from the head of the table. Our mother. Just a whisper. Clarice? The room froze. What have you done? The mask cracked. Clarice stood suddenly, napkin flung onto her plate like it burned her. This is what she does, she shouted. She digs until there's nothing left to bury. She's always been jealous. But the room was no longer with her. A few guests stood quietly and walked out. One uncle muttered, disgraceful, before following. Even George didn't move to stop them. Helen said nothing. Didn't rise, didn't protest. She just stared at her plate, as if listening to a truth older than all of us. I reached for one last document. A letter. Handwritten. My mother's handwriting. Addressed to the family lawyer. Retracting all prior consent. Dated 6 weeks ago. This house, I said softly, has 2 doors. Clarice's breath came fast, shallow. I met her gaze. Today, I said, I walk out the one you didn't build. I stood and walked away. Outside, the night air hit like clarity. Cool, unapologetic. I hadn't gone far when I noticed someone lingering at the corner. A young man, no camera, just a notepad, a press badge around his neck. He didn't move toward me, didn't shout. He just said quietly, someone thought you deserved to be heard, that's all. Then turned and walked away. No fanfare, no questions. But that was all I needed. A week passed before anything truly moved. No breaking headlines, no viral exposés. But within the quiet corners of the internet, on financial forums, ethics boards, legal discussion threads, a blog post began to circulate. It wasn't sensational. It wasn't loud. It was precise. Written by a man named Holloway, my grandfather's oldest friend, the one who always kept peppermint candies in his jacket pocket. He didn't name names, didn't reveal numbers. But he spoke of legacy, of a girl in a red scarf who had been erased only to return with receipts. She was always the one Arthur worried about, he wrote, not because she was weak, but because she saw too much. The post struck a nerve. Within 72 hours, Clarice was asked to step down from her board seat. Her license was suspended pending review. No public drama. No courtroom theater. Just the quiet pull of power realigning itself. My phone rang 4 times. The first call came from my mother's cell. I didn't answer. The second came from the estate landline. I ignored that one too. Third was George. Fourth, Clarice. None of them left voicemails. They didn't need to. I already knew what they'd say. Why did you make it public? Why couldn't you just let it go? But I had let it go, for years. I had swallowed silence like medicine, bitterness like air. Now I was full. And when you're full, you stop feeding people who only show up with empty hands and apologies disguised as blame. One morning, I sat on a park bench beneath the old oak tree. Our tree, Grandpa used to call it. The same bench where I used to read chapter books and believe in fairness. The breeze carried the scent of grass and something faintly floral, lilacs maybe. In my lap was a small blue savings book, the kind old banks used to hand out to children. Most of the pages were blank now, ink faded, edges frayed. But it was mine. Tucked inside, hidden between 2 pages, I found something I hadn't noticed before. A note, faded yellow, folded twice, paper as thin as breath. My grandfather's handwriting. For the youngest, because she has the biggest heart. Use it when they forget who you are. My throat tightened. No performance, no breakdown. Just stillness. That kind of stillness that settles not just over the moment, but over years. I didn't cry. I smiled. Not the performative kind. Not the see, I'm fine kind. The quiet kind. The kind that arrives when something broken has finally been acknowledged. I placed the note back in the ledger, carefully. And I knew deep down what I'd always known. I hadn't needed their praise. Not my father's rare compliments. Not Clarissa's false sisterhood. Not my mother's conditional affection. I had wanted to be seen, but I had always seen myself. That was the difference. That was the shift. I had been too busy surviving to notice the strength I was building. And now I had built something that could not be dismantled. Later that week, the nonprofit opened its new headquarters. Steel, glass, understated, clean lines, no marble, no thrones, just space for women, for teens, for anyone who had once been overlooked. The sign above the door read, Elevant Initiative, etched in soft silver. I paused beneath it that morning, coffee in hand, bag slung over one shoulder. The receptionist greeted me. Morning, Ms. Lev. It still made me pause. That name. Not as legacy, as choice. Morning, I said, smiling. She handed me a small stack of mail. Most of it was routine, but one envelope stood out. Cream paper, gold-embossed return address. My mother's handwriting. Again. I didn't open it. Not yet. I slipped it into my bag. Later. Maybe. That afternoon, back in my office, I curled my feet under me and stared out the window while my coffee went cold beside a spreadsheet I wasn't really reading. My inbox pinged. A message from Carmen. Subject line, thought you'd want to see this. An attachment. A photograph. A grainy still, taken from a security camera in the Crescent Bank lobby. It showed a woman, knees buckled, expression frozen mid-collapse. Vera. The moment she fell. It had been posted anonymously, then reshared, quietly, not virally, but consistently. The caption? The silence before accountability. I stared at it, not with satisfaction, not with guilt, with something else. A closing. Not for them. For me. I replied to Carmen. Archive it. No press release. No interviews. No celebratory tweet. Just a chapter closed. That night, I opened the cream envelope. It was shorter than the first letter. A single page. You don't owe me a reply, she wrote. But I owed you more than silence. I see that now. She didn't ask for forgiveness. Didn't beg for reunion. If this is goodbye, I'll accept it. But if there's room for a future, I'd like to meet you there, somewhere honest, somewhere real. I folded the letter, placed it gently behind my grandfather's note. Not as closure, as record. The next morning, I walked into the community center 5 minutes early. We were starting our first workshop in a new city partnership, Finance as a Second Language, designed for women in transitional housing. Budgeting, business planning, salary negotiation, real tools, real power. After the session, a woman named Alondra approached me. Are you the founder? She asked. I am, I said. She studied me for a moment, then smiled. I thought so. You look like someone who's seen both sides of the window. I blinked, then smiled back. I have. She nodded once, satisfied. Thanks for not forgetting us. I couldn't, I said, even if I tried. Later, as I cleaned up, I found a sticky note under one of the chairs, scrawled in bold marker. Make space, not excuses. I pressed it flat against my palm, then stuck it on the edge of my monitor. Not a mission. Not a motto. A memory. Of what this was all for. Not revenge. Not validation. Just space. To breathe. To build. To begin again. The days after that unfolded gently, like the dust had finally begun to settle. There were no headlines, no rumors worth chasing, no late-night texts from people trying to dig up pieces of a story I'd already buried. Instead, there was quiet. Steady, soft, real. For the first time in years, I stopped checking the bank's systems obsessively. I didn't scroll through news alerts. Carmen had systems in place now, fail-safes, flags, and filters. I trusted her to catch any fire before it reached my door. On Thursday afternoon, I received a call from the city. They wanted to honor the Levant Initiative with a Civic Leadership Award. At first, I hesitated. Awards meant exposure. Exposure meant attention. And attention, well, it hadn't always been kind to me. But something inside me, a voice I hadn't heard in years, answered before I could overthink it. Yes, I said, we'd be honored. Because this time I wasn't accepting an award to prove I mattered. This time I already knew. Saturday morning found me at the corner grocery store in my old neighborhood. The same store with crooked signs and cereal boxes, always one sale away from expiration. The kind of place where the floor tiles never quite matched, and the carts squeaked if you turned too fast. I loved it. It was honest. I turned into the cereal aisle and nearly collided with a familiar figure. Mrs. Hutchkins. She gasped, hand to her chest, then broke into a wide smile. My dear, she said, eyes twinkling beneath her wool hat. It's been weeks. Her voice was warm. Her hands still trembled slightly as she adjusted her coat. I meant to stop by, she said. You saved me, Celine. That $100, it wasn't just groceries. It reminded me there's still kindness in this world. I blinked fast, swallowing the sudden burn in my throat. Thank you, I whispered, but I think you did the saving. She chuckled. You always were more powerful than you let on. She patted my arm and shuffled off toward the produce. I stood there for a while longer, watching her disappear between crates of bruised apples and slightly wilted lettuce. It struck me then, not all rescues look like headlines. Some just look like a woman standing beside a cereal shelf, saying thank you. Man. That night, I stood on my balcony, watching the sunset fold itself across the city skyline. The buildings glowed in hues of soft violet and burnt gold. Birds circled in the distance, dipping in and out of view, like memories that hadn't quite settled. I thought about everything I had lost. Then I thought about everything I had reclaimed. My voice, my name, my dignity. And I realized maybe the reason I never truly fit into that family wasn't because I was broken. Maybe I was just built for something beyond their imagination. I wasn't meant to inherit the house. I was meant to build a new one. The Civic Award ceremony took place in a sunlit atrium downtown. There were no flashing lights, no television crews, just tall glass windows, a string quartet in the corner, and rows of folding chairs filled with faces I actually recognized. Not socialites, not shareholders, community organizers, teachers, volunteers, young women in their first business suits. I stood at the podium, my speech folded neatly in my hand. But I didn't open it. Instead, I looked out across the room and began. When I was 10 years old, I said, I set up a lemonade stand in our driveway. A few soft laughs. I thought it would be easy. I thought people would stop just because I was excited, because I believed they would. I smiled. But before I made a single sale, someone knocked over the pitcher. The laughter faded. I remember crying, not because I lost the lemonade, but because I thought maybe they were right, that I didn't belong in the world of building things, that I wasn't meant to lead. I paused, let the words settle. But sometimes the world knocks over your pitcher just to see if you'll find another recipe. That earned a ripple of warm laughter, a few nods, a few tears. I've spent most of my life building in silence, not because I had nothing to say, but because no one thought I was worth hearing. But here's the thing. Kindness, courage, and clarity, they don't need a spotlight. They grow in the dark, and when they're ready, they light the whole room. I looked up. And if no one else tells you this, I will. You matter. You can build. And one day, the people who overlooked you will sit in rooms shaped by your blueprints. The applause wasn't thunderous. It was honest. And that was enough. After the ceremony, I lingered outside the building, bouquet in hand. Carmen joined me, heels clicking softly against the stone walkway. Well, she said, slipping on her sunglasses, that was the most emotional civic event I've ever attended. I laughed. That's a very Carmen compliment. She grinned. You know they're going to reach out again. I didn't ask who she meant. I already knew. My family, I said. She nodded. In some form, some angle. They already have, I said quietly. In their own way. Will you respond? I thought about it. The notes, the calls, the photograph Clarice sent. Maybe it was closure. Maybe it was bait. I might, I said. I might not. I don't think it matters anymore. Carmen studied me. You're not angry anymore, she said. I looked out across the skyline where the last strip of gold melted into dusk. No, I said, I'm just full. That night, back home, I reached for the blue savings ledger one more time. Ran my fingers along the spine. I didn't open it. I didn't need to. Some things are meant to be held, not reread. But I did slip something inside. A fresh note, plain white paper, crisp black ink. For the next girl who thinks she's invisible, you're not. Build anyway. The next morning, I walked into the nonprofit's office like I did every Monday, coffee in hand, shoulder bag slung across my body, hair unbothered. But something felt different, lighter, like I'd finally come home to myself. The receptionist waved me down. Mail came early, she said, holding up a cream-colored envelope. No return address. But I recognized the handwriting. Clarice. I stared at it for a second, then flipped it open. Just one photograph. An old one. 2 little girls in matching dresses. Me, grinning shyly with crooked teeth and frizzy hair. Clarice beside me, arm around my shoulders, laughing at something out of frame. On the back, in her handwriting. I didn't protect you, Celine, but you never stopped protecting yourself. I see that now. No apology. No defense. Just truth. And maybe that was enough too. I held the photo for a long time. Not because I didn't know what to do with it, but because for the first time I didn't feel the urgency to do anything. No need to react. No need to analyze. No need to respond. Just stillness. I slid it gently into the back of the blue ledger, not as forgiveness, not as closure. As our record. Clarice had seen me, finally. Whether it was too late or just in time didn't seem to matter anymore. The weeks that followed were quiet, almost unnervingly so. Autumn tipped gently into winter, and the nonprofit bloomed in ways I hadn't expected. We doubled the number of financial literacy workshops, added childcare services to our evening classes, started a mentorship program for girls aging out of the foster system. It was real, grounded progress. Not flashy, not headline-worthy, but deeply rooted. One afternoon, while I was carrying a box of workshop materials to the resource room, a young woman stopped me in the hallway. She couldn't have been older than 22. "Hey, are you the one who used to work in tech?" she asked, hesitant. I smiled. Sort of. Why? She shrugged, then said something that caught me completely off guard. "I just didn't think people like you existed." I blinked. Like me? Yeah, quiet, powerful, kind of unstoppable. For a second, I didn't know what to say. So I didn't. Instead, I reached into my bag and pulled out a blank notebook, the kind I always kept on hand. I handed it to her. "Write everything," I said, "even the stuff you think no one will ever read." She nodded, clutching it like it mattered. And I realized it did. Early one morning in December, I found myself back in front of Crescent Bank. Not for vengeance, not for validation. Just to witness, to remember. I didn't go through the front doors this time. Instead, I lingered across the street, half hidden behind a line of newspaper dispensers. Inside, the lobby buzzed with early traffic. And then I saw her, Vera, no longer behind the glass wall or sitting high at the manager's desk. She was in line, waiting, like everyone else. Hair pulled back in a loose bun, plain coat, eyes low. She didn't see me, and I didn't call out to her. I didn't need to. Some ghosts don't need confrontation. Some just need distance. So I turned and walked away. Not with satisfaction, but with freedom. Christmas came quietly. I didn't decorate much. No tree, no lights, just 2 candles on the windowsill. One for my grandfather, and one for the girl I used to be. The one who thought a lemonade stand could fix everything. On New Year's Eve, I returned to the park bench beneath the oak tree. Same spot. Same hush of wind through bare branches. This time I wasn't alone. Carmen sat beside me, sipping from a travel thermos. "Any resolutions?" she asked, blowing into her drink, her breath fogging in the cold. I thought about it, then nodded. "Just one." She looked over. "Yeah. To never forget who I am," I said. "Not even when they try to." She smiled. "That's a good one." We sat there in silence, watching a child chase a golden retriever through patches of frost. The dog barked once, tail wagging, full of joy. It felt like a promise. That joy could return. That stillness could last. That night, just before midnight, I opened my laptop one last time for the year, logged into the shellcode dashboard, watched the numbers blink softly in the dark. All the accounts. All the holdings. Everything they told me I'd never have. Still mine. Still secure. But now, it didn't own me. I closed the laptop gently and walked to the window. I opened it. Let the wind in. Cold, clean, clear. Then, on impulse, I pulled a fresh page from my journal and began to write. January 1st. This year, I invest in something different. Not silence, not anger, not even vindication. This year, I invest in women who were told to wait, in girls who were called too loud, in men who know how to listen, in homes without thrones, in voices that aren't backed by gold, but by grit. I invest in rebuilding, in remembering, in rising. His song. The next morning, the city was wrapped in a soft layer of snow. Everything looked undisturbed, brand new. And so did I. No baggage. No fear. No borrowed shame. I walked through the front doors of the Levant Initiative with coffee in one hand and my heart, finally, at ease. The receptionist greeted me like always, bright-eyed and warm. Mail came early again, she said, handing me a single envelope. No return address. But the handwriting, delicate, slanted, familiar, was unmistakable. Clarice. I turned it over. Considered tossing it. Considered saving it for later. Instead, I opened it right there. Inside was a photograph. Just one. Us, as kids. Matching dresses, frizzy hair, plastic jewelry. Clarice's arm slung lazily over my shoulder, mid-laugh. I was looking up at her, messy, toothy grin. The kind of love that didn't know how to question itself yet. On the back, in her handwriting, I didn't protect you, Celine, but you never stopped protecting yourself. I see that now. No apology. No spin. Just a sentence. I held the photo for a long time, thumb tracing the corners, then slipped it into the back of the blue ledger. Not because it fixed anything, but because it happened. Because sometimes telling the truth is enough.
At 10.
Time moved forward the way it always does, unapologetically, without ceremony. Weeks passed. Winter arrived like a whisper, not a scream. Gentle flurries, long shadows, the kind of cold that invites stillness instead of fear. The nonprofit kept growing. Word spread. Applications tripled. We launched new programs, microloans for women exiting domestic violence shelters, a mentorship circle for young girls entering STEM fields. We hosted a workshop on negotiation strategies for first-generation professionals. And through it all, I stayed grounded. Present. No longer bracing for impact. Just moving forward.
Yes.
One afternoon, I was walking through the hallway between back-to-back meetings when a young woman flagged me down. She looked nervous, hopeful, like someone trying to hold her dream in both hands without letting it slip. "Are you Celine?" she asked. I nodded. "Are you the one who started all this?" "I am," I said. She smiled, almost like it hurt to believe. "I just wanted to say thank you. You've given me something I thought I'd lost." "What's that?" I asked gently. "Belief," she said. "In myself." I smiled. "You already had it. You just needed space to remember." She blinked fast, then walked away, head higher than before. And for a second, I felt the ghost of that little girl with the lemonade stand, standing in the driveway, waiting for someone, anyone, to believe in her. She would have loved this. A few days later, I received a call from the mayor's office. The city was recognizing the Levant Initiative with a Civic Leadership Award, again. This time not for our growth, but for our impact. I was surprised, grateful, but calm. This wasn't about prestige. It was about proof, quiet, undeniable proof that our work mattered, that we mattered. The ceremony took place in a bright atrium at City Hall, modest but elegant, no red carpet, just folding chairs, potted plants, and name cards printed with care. As I stood at the podium again, bouquet in hand, I glanced at the speech I had prepared, then folded it without reading a word. Instead, I looked out at the audience, dozens of people who had been told, at one point or another, that they didn't belong at the table. And I said, "When I was 10 years old, I wanted to sell lemonade." Soft laughter. I thought if I just worked hard, smiled brightly, and believed big enough, it would work. A few nods. But someone knocked the pitcher over, and for a long time I thought that moment defined me. I paused. But now I know, it refined me. Heads tilted, eyes held. That little girl didn't disappear. She grew up. She built something new. And now she gets to make sure no one else loses their pitcher without a backup plan. The applause was quiet, but full. Real. After the ceremony, Carmen joined me on the stone steps outside, her heels clicking softly beside mine. "That," she said, "was the most you've ever said with so little." I laughed. "Thanks?" She smiled. "They're going to reach out again." "Who?" I asked, though I already knew. "Your family." I looked out at the skyline. The buildings glowing like the horizon was remembering something kind. "They already have," I said. "Letters, photos, rumors through old friends." "Will you answer?" I don't know yet, I said. I'm not angry anymore, but I'm not hungry for closure either. She nodded. That's growth. No, I corrected softly. That's peace. That evening, I sat alone in my office. Laptop closed. Desk clear. The only sound was the ticking of the wall clock and the slow hum of the heater. I pulled the blue ledger from its spot on the bookshelf and opened to the last page. The photo of me and Clarice stared up at me. So much hope in my face. So much assumption in hers. I slipped in a final note. Fresh ink, clean page. To the next girl who builds something no one believes in, don't stop, even when the world stops looking, especially then. I folded it, tucked it behind the others, then closed the book, and exhaled. One crisp Thursday morning, I arrived at the office early. Sun not yet over the buildings, streets still slick with dew. I was sipping my coffee, sorting through the day's agenda, when the receptionist buzzed in. You have a visitor. I frowned. A walk-in? She didn't give a name, but she's insistent. Says she isn't leaving until you see her. My heart didn't race. It steadied. Send her in. The door opened slowly. And there she was. Helen. My mother. Her coat was perfectly pressed, her hair pulled back into the same low chignon she'd worn at every family function. But she looked smaller now, not frail, just softer, as if time had finally caught up to her, but hadn't broken her. She didn't speak at first. She simply stood there, looking around my office like it was the first room in years she didn't know how to control. It's quiet in here, she said. It's peaceful, I replied. A pause. Then, you look like your grandfather. That landed somewhere between a compliment and a confession. I nodded. I kept his name, I said. Lev, quietly, for years. I know, she whispered. That was part of what made it harder. Harder for whom? I wondered, but I didn't ask. She stepped closer, hands clasped in front of her. I wanted to speak plainly. I waited. I let them choose for me. Clarice, George, your father. I thought keeping peace meant keeping you out. I didn't move. I see now that silence isn't peace, she continued. It's erasure, and I let it happen. She didn't cry, and I didn't reach for her. The space between us remained intact, respectful, quiet, unsentimental. I read the article, she added, the one Mr. Holloway wrote. I nodded again. She smiled faintly. He always believed in you. I know, I said. He told me, every time I saw him. She pulled something from her purse, a tiny envelope, unmarked. Your grandfather left this. He said it wasn't for legal matters. Said it was just something for you to hold. I hesitated, then took it. She didn't ask if I'd read it. She didn't ask for a seat. She just stepped back and said, You don't have to forgive me. I looked up. I'm not sure forgiveness is what I needed, I said. She nodded. I know. Then she turned and left. Damn. I didn't open the envelope right away. I let it sit on the corner of my desk while the sun finished rising. When the time felt right, I peeled it open. Inside, one small note. No signature, no date, just his handwriting. They will call it pride, but it is simply knowing who you are. Don't let them unteach you that. My breath caught for a moment. Not in grief, in recognition. That weekend, I returned to the neighborhood where I'd grown up. Not for nostalgia, for clarity. The house had been sold, but the park remained. Same rusted swing set, same cracked sidewalk, same old oak tree, still holding court at the corner of the field. I sat on the familiar bench. Same one I used to cry on when I felt invisible. Only now I felt seen, even if only by myself, especially by myself. Later that day, I visited a women's shelter we had just partnered with. We were donating laptops and running digital literacy classes. As I walked through the common room, a woman in her 30s approached me. She had kind eyes and a notebook tucked under her arm. Ms. Lev? She asked. I nodded. I wanted to say, I'm here because of your story. I tilted my head. You read the article? She smiled. No, someone in the legal clinic told me about you. Said you used to walk through snow to cash out $100 for a neighbor. I blinked. That memory. So small. But it had echoed. Thank you, she said. You reminded me that I don't need to be perfect. I just need to begin. I reached into my bag, pulled out a new notebook, handed it to her. Then begin here. The nonprofit hit its 1-year anniversary that spring. We didn't throw a gala. We hosted a block party. No suits, no speeches. Just music, food trucks, sidewalk chalk, and free advice booths staffed by financial planners and volunteers. We handed out grant applications, laptops, and hugs. Lots of hugs. And somewhere between the laughter and music, I caught myself watching the crowd with a quiet kind of awe. Not pride. Something deeper. Belonging. That night, I returned home with sore feet and a full heart. I lit a candle on the windowsill, then pulled out the blue ledger one final time. It was worn now, edges curled, filled with letters, notes, and memories, like threads stitched together. I added one last page, not addressed to anyone, just titled, Beggars. I didn't rise to be seen. I rose to build, to protect the ones who hadn't yet found their voice, to show that silence can bloom into structure, and that softness can still hold power. This is not revenge. This is not a lesson. This is reclamation. This is remembering. This is mine. I closed the ledger, placed it gently into its box. And for the first time in my life, I didn't feel like I was carrying anything at all. Outside, the city breathed softly beneath the stars. And somewhere, I knew, another girl, quiet, overlooked, underestimated, was sketching a blueprint on the back of a napkin. I hoped she'd find this story one day. And if she did, I hoped she'd know. She isn't alone. She never was.